just the end of an era. He was the pinnacle of stallions in North America. He was the highest priced stallion at $500,000 for the longest time. He drew the most attention at sales. He had the best young horses to race.
We've had great stallions over the years, Bold Ruler, Northern Dancer, you know, Mr. Prospector, before him, his sire raised a native, but Stormcat probably tops them all.
There's one thing to have talent, it's another thing to throttle and harness that ability. With the Stormcat, you get the full package.
Precocious horses, turf horses, stayers, sprinters, fillies, colts. His record in the sales ring was unequaled, and you talk about a gold mine, he was it.
And now McCarran goes with a right-handed whip, but Pate's horse is too much. Tabasco Cat, a half length.
Stormcat was an excellent sire, and the fact that he's now pensioned, it's a big loss to the breeding community, but his sons and daughters, I'm sure, will continue to go on and do great things.
We're going to see those bloodlines for a while, even as a grandsire, and we're still going to hear at the starting gate, oh, that one's acting up. Oh, it must be a Stormcat.
Well, I think the year of racing, we've had some tragedies, and I think it was imperative that the Breeders' Cup was really a good day of racing. And not only was it good, it was great.
Away they go.
Everybody was questioning, was it a mistake to bring it to Santa Anita? Was it a mistake to change the track at the last moment? Answer, no and no. It was a tremendous day.
The mountains, the atmosphere, the horsemen that have come through here. You think about Bill Shoemaker and Charles Whittingham, who have been a huge part of this racetrack, and for the Breeders' Cup to choose Santa Anita as their 25th anniversary spot was ideal.
I thought it was the best Breeders' Cup we ever had, and one of the reasons I thought was because of the synthetic track was fair, it was safe, and it brought the best of Europe over here to compete.
I've always been a huge fan of the Euro shipping to the States for the Breeders' Cup races. I think they've sent many a horse that has been competitive in the Classic. For one reason or another, it has not played out for them.
It's very hot here. Of course, that time of year, it can be upwards of 100 degrees. In Europe, during Breeders' Cup, it's more like 40 degrees, so that's a pretty dramatic shock for those horses. But this year, with the synthetic surfaces, we attracted a lot of the European runners.
And you say to yourself, well, okay, it was synthetic. All right, well, I guess turf horses are going to be an advantage. Guess what, folks? That means that we're going to have bigger fields. Bigger fields, bigger audience. More money, more interest.
Eagle Mountain and Conduit, but Conduit has the staying power, and Conduit, perfectly ridden by Ryan Moore, has won it. Conduit.
A breakthrough for the Europeans. On Breeders' Cup Saturday, they won 5 of the 9 Breeders' Cup races.
They all stood up and showed up, bringing their races to the track, be it on the main or the turf, in the 2008 Breeders' Cup, and what a classic it was.
Along the inside, Henry the Navigator's coming home gamely as well, but it's going to be Raven's Pass to win it. Raven's Pass and Frankie Dettori have won the Classic.
John Gosden, what a story there. Here is a trainer who trained in Southern California in the 1980s until returning to England in 1988, and 20 years after returning to England, he comes back to Southern California, a homecoming, to win 2 Breeders' Cup races, one with Donativum, the other with Raven's Pass, in the big one, the Breeders' Cup Classic.
As much of a Curlin fan as I am, to see him get beat, it pained me a little bit. But Raven's Pass was as impressive as they come in the Classic.
When we return, a look back at how Curlin passed Cigar, becoming North America's richest racehorse.
Having the greatest retired living jockeys compete again was like going back in history, so we could appreciate it just one more time.
Holly, Cordero, Stevens, Day, Bailey. Let's go down the list.
To me, it would be like getting Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar back together again to have a pickup game. But for these guys, it was real.
I'm on the outside. You're going to be on the outside.
Yeah. 1 second. It had a lot of sex appeal. I mean, it played out for a long time in the media. media. People were anticipating it. There was a lot of coverage of these riders from Canada to the States, wherever they may be, getting ready, getting fit, getting up to the task.
Watching those jockeys come out of the jocks room, make their way into the paddock, receive instruction before getting a leg up one final time. It was like being in a time warp, seeing those big names. And this was the greatest old-timers game I have ever witnessed in sports.
And Sandy Hawley and Tribal Chief romping home, 59 years old. Sandy Hawley still got it.
With the win, Sandy Hawley registering his 6,450th career win.
To see Sandy come back and win like he had been doing when I was growing up watching him, it just goes to show you that you can, it's like riding a bicycle, I guess.
If you were to look up in the dictionary and find the word racehorse, next to it should be written Midnight Lute.
Midnight Lute coming like an express train.
He was so game in his races. He achieved more than he physically should have achieved with his breathing issues.
Midnight Lute kind of had a tough year. He was plagued by a foot problem that he developed when racing down in Del Mar.
This, to me, was one of the greatest training achievements by Bob Baffert in his distinguished career.
This is a horse who goes out there in the morning and just blazes through his workouts. And a lot of horses will do that in the morning. That's why they call them morning glories, and not show it in the afternoon. But I think Midnight Lute is a big exception to that.
He'd had only one 2008 start going into the Breeders' Cup Sprint.
And away they go.
I talked to Bob Baffert before the race, and he said to me, Midnight Lute's going to win and he's going to break the track record. And I said, well, just win.
Midnight Lute on the grandstand side.
I think when we look at the 2008 Breeders' Cup as a whole, Midnight Lute might be the one race or the one horse that kind of gets overlooked with Zenyatta and the Europeans and what Garrett Gomez did and Curlin getting beat.
Midnight Lute just plain got too much class.
There was nothing like Midnight Lute when he extended his stride about the 8th pull. He was already all out, it seemed, but yet he was able to take it to another level. And that's when you get chills in this game.
Here comes Zenyatta yet again, just a tap on the shoulder. Ian Fricks, he's just looking at the other three and striding away effortlessly.
There can be no question that one of the highlights of 2008, Zenyatta, undefeated coming into the year with 2 wins and then winning all 7 of her races in 2008, capped by a brilliant performance in the Breeders' Cup Ladies Classic.
She was the only horse going into the 2008 Breeders' Cup that actually carried a race in and out with a win, and that was pretty darn tremendous.
Zenyatta's going to come home to score. Undoubtedly now, a living legend. Zenyatta 9 for 9 wins.
You have to consider that this year's Distaffers were really a special group, and yet Zenyatta was in a league of her own. I mean, she danced every single dance there was, and she put on a display in the Breeders' Cup for us.
She was as good as Inside Information. She was as good as Azeri, Princess Rooney, some of the best performances we've ever seen in the former Breeders' Cup Distaff, now Ladies Classic.
This was my favorite moment the entire year. I mean, I don't usually get sentimental about horses, especially ones that I don't own myself, but it was perfection. And anytime you see perfection in any sport or any walk of life, you sit back and you admire it. And I just, I don't applaud too many times for horses, but I certainly put my hands together for a true champion, an undefeated, perfect champion, Zenyatta.
There are many different ways to gauge a horse's greatness, and as superficial as it sounds, one of them is money earned.